And the 1-2. Swinging a drive toward right center. Back goes Robert. Back near the stands. That ball is gone. A game-winning home run for Chris Morel. Can you believe it? Listen to this crowd.
This is the Brotherly Cubs podcast, a new podcast that centers around two brothers, just two brothers, that love the Chicago Cubs. My name is Zach Flatten. I'm joined here by my brother, John Flatten. John, tell us how long you've been a Cubs fan and what got you into the Cubs.
Oh, man, I've been a Cubs fan since the early days of Aramis Ramirez and no, even earlier than that. Sammy Sosa and Jose Hernandez and Rod Beck. So, I mean, ever since they were on WGN.
Right. I've noticed a ton of Cubs fans all over the U.S., and I think the common theme is WGN. I've been a fan since the 2003 playoff run. Again, big guys like Aramis Ramirez. Derek Lee was on the Marlins the first year I started watching the Cubs. Obviously, Sammy Sosa, and then we all know about the big pitching, the trio, the rotation, Pryor, Woods, and Brano, guys like that. But yeah, I'm glad for you to join me, and hopefully we can keep this going during the off season. It's exciting because the Cubs are not in the playoffs, so we don't have to stress about them losing or blowing a lead, or they've already done their meltdown, so we don't have to worry about them melting down anymore. So let's segue into the off season in preparation for the 2024 season. First of all, I think this was a really good team. What did you think about the 2023 season as a whole?
I thought it was great. I mean, I thought, you got a good glimpse into the future as far as what we can expect. New expectations were set. There's a clear understanding of where we need to go moving forward. I think I'm pleased. I mean, obviously you want, the way that it ended, we wanted to make the playoffs. But as far as the future, I mean, as everybody keeps saying, the future looks bright.
Yes, it does.
There's always next year.
There's always next year. We say that too much, but yeah, I concur with you, good sir. I think go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's less of that vibe as far as pessimism goes, and I think there's more of an optimistic viewpoint. I think, going forward, I think we have a solid team. We have
there's no Schwisdom, there's no Frank Schwindel and Patrick Wisdom on the corners. There's no Ortega in center. So I mean, I guess we can agree there was a meltdown of sorts, but an 83 win team. That some projections had us at 78 wins. That's definitely, I would say that felt cold at the time, but I also tentatively thought, let's get to 500, and they sure did. They got to 2 above 500.
I think
they did it the hard way, didn't they? We got a very slow start, coupled with some roller coaster runs, coupled with a really hot summer, and then it ended with a very brisk fall. I don't have in front of me how many wins they had, but they lost to the Rockies and the Pirates, as well as the Brewers and Braves. At the end, they did not rest their team as much as we thought they would. I think that was a tough one, I think.
Yeah, I think, like you just said, I mean, resting guys, when they need it. I mean, obviously we had some Mondays off there and Thursdays that are, they're rest days, but, Swanson could have used some more rest days. That's a popular opinion, I think, with a lot of people, a lot of Cubs fans. And, he was kind of struggling down the stretch.
Yes,
I think
he did.
We've talked about,
180.
So hopefully, Ross is able to kind of learn from that, and hopefully there's some chirping going on in his ear about, ways that he can be better as a manager. If we do somehow retain him and keep him in the fold. I mean, he's under contract. I think we talked about this too, is like, I'm not a big fan of David Ross, and he's made some mistakes but I don't want to put it solely on him. But the mistakes that he's making just aren't
Right.
helping.
There,
You talked about, sorry, I was just gonna say real quick, Justin Steele, I think is, building up endurance and knows now what it takes to pitch. I want to say he pitched a full season, right? Was he I don't think he went on the injured list, did he?
to my knowledge, I don't think I think he skipped a start or two.
Okay.
So he avoided the 15-day
Mm-hmm.
with some forearm tightness, which is a common injury for all pitchers. But for the Cubs
Mm-hmm.
this year, that was a very, very common injury. Yeah, and he recovered well. The bullpen did not recover, and we will definitely get into that here very, very shortly. It's on my list here of things to do. Actually, let's segue. As much as we felt like the team stepped up, I want to talk about what can we do? What can we do? God, I wish. No. Wish I was getting paid millions of dollars to make these decisions. And yet sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I would even be able to make them. But theoretically, if we were in the GMs, if we were in the front office, what would we do to make this next 2024 Cub season special? We've talked before about being in that competitive window of contention, right? So
Mm-hmm.
having several years of control, players that are pre-arb or under good deals. If you look at Steele, I think he's might be getting paid $5 to $6 million next year. Arbitration
Mm-hmm.
guy. Um, so with that being said, as much as this team is building through their prospects, and acquisitions, things they can do, I'd like to talk about some internal improvements we can make this season to build a better team. So one of the big failings of 2023 was the bullpen, and I do think that the resting of guys and not having a wide enough circle of trust. Bleacher Nation has talked about in the past before about not only can you never have enough pitching, but also you're going to need way more than you think, and you're going to need to throw tons of guys not only at the rotation but at the bullpen. Guys are going to get hurt, and even the guys that we depended on, like Fulmer and Alzolay, they got hurt. Leiter kind of lost a little bit of his swing and miss with the splitter, which is neutralizing pitch against lefties. They didn't even have any lefties hardly the whole season. In fact, they had Luke Little come up, who they had some big meteoric rises. Daniel Palencia, Luke Little, some of these guys were starting at single A, high A South Bend. They made their way all the way up. They switched to the bullpen from starting. And I think that's a tremendous focus point of the front office as director of pitching, assistant GM Craig Breslow is interviewing for the Red Sox GM position this week. Hopefully they don't lose a guy like him, but they do have Carter Hawkins as the GM, which we never hear the very elusive Carter Hawkins. But that was his focus, is to take this team and build into a pitching powerhouse. And so I think you're going to see guys like Ben Brown come up and potentially not even start. He might go in the bullpen. He's got great stuff. He throws 97, 98. He sits 95, 96. He's got a nasty downward looking. He doesn't throw a sweeper, but he throws a nasty curveball. He has a curveball and a slider.
He's so
God
much.
bless you.
The mic fell off.
And there's a lot of opportunity there. We mentioned Palencia and Little. There's guys like Jose Cuas, who they acquired, but he's got plenty of years of control. And there's also Brandon Hughes and Keegan Thompson. I am, of this list of internal options that the Cubs could use next year to strengthen the bullpen within the circle of trust. I'm really looking at Brandon Hughes as a lefty that they need to give them some high leverage innings and give them some swing and miss. Are there any names that you want to highlight for next season that you think will be crucial or that you hope to improve next year in the bullpen?
I mean, obviously, you want those flamethrowers, like a Jose Alvarado type of player.
A lefty with a sinker that throws 98?
Yeah, he's got
I'd love
incredible
that.
stuff. And Palencia has got the stuff. I know, we both talked about this a little bit. It's just he has to control it. His control issues are, a factor in him, either making the team or not, or, honing his skills in AAA. But I mean, There's also chirpings. Is that a word? Chirpings about
Rumblings.
rumblings. There you go. About Brandon Morrow possibly making a comeback.
The last I heard,
I heard something. Did you see that? I was like,
100 feet.
where
Yeah, he's thrown from 100 feet was the joke
is
on
that?
Twitter.
Is that what
I,
you
I
sent me?
love Cubs Twitter, man. Some of these guys are genius. I don't think he's thrown a pitch. I don't think he threw a pitch for the Cubs in the minors or anything since 2019, which we really
Yeah.
could have used him. I think that was the Kimbrel year we signed him because we really needed him because of no Morrow. And man, I would love Brandon Morrow to come back on a minor league. No, those days are
I,
gone. I mean,
those days are gone.
I don't know what he's doing right now. He's just cashing in his IRA and hanging out and
Right.
drinking Mai Tais or drinking some rum with mango or pineapple or some kind of simple
Yeah.
syrup.
Right. Something. I mean, who knows? He might have a beard and, just like Ron Burgundy in
Yeah,
like
he
the
might have a
90s,
thick
like
pirate beard,
thick pirate beard, and he's just drinking away at Murphy's Pub and, you
Yeah,
know,
that would
drinking
be
away his
a terrible look
sorrows.
for him. The
Sorrows
sorrows of
tomorrow.
Morrow.
Sorrows tomorrow.
Uh,
So I mean, other than Palencia, obviously you'd like to see Keegan Thompson figure it out. He's got, pretty good stuff. Um, I
he's on my
really am
list.
encouraged.
He's
Yeah.
on my list, and I'll tell you what, he looked really good in 2022 as a it's funny because Thompson had a similar look as both Alzolay and Steele. I remember writing some depth notes for starters. I think the last couple of years, and those guys were on my list of seventh and eighth starters until Steele obviously rose to an ace. I mean, he's going to get some Cy Young votes this year as a essentially number 3 in the Cy Young. But yeah, Thompson, it seemed like for a while he was going to be a starter when he converted the bullpen. I think he had an ERA in the twos compared to the
Mhm.
fours. Um, he got injured and fell apart this year, and he was in Iowa for quite some time. Didn't really have it. I'm curious to see if they'll. I think the problem at the start of this year was he wasn't able to recover quickly enough after throwing 1 inning. Instead, they'd have him throw 2 to 3 innings, and he would then have to be down 3 days. So I'm thinking the Cubs will have a ton of long relief guys like Smiley, potentially Wesneski, potentially one of Wicks or Assad if they make any other additions. There's going to be almost too many depth guys, and I look for Thompson if he wants to make a role in this pen. He's going to have to pitch late in the game. We know he's got a little bit of a fastball, but he's going to need to channel that cutter, that curveball for swing and miss, and to pitch multiple days in a row, 2, 3 days in a row. We obviously saw too much of Quas doing that, and so
Yeah.
when you get in Ross's circle, he tends to use you a ton. So
Right.
guys like we've mentioned here, I think can really take some of the sting off of the trio of Leiter, Merriweather, and Alzolay in that 7, 8, 9. If you don't have to use those guys every single day. Speaking of which, Merriweather does have the gas that we talked about.
Yeah.
Palencia does too. Birdie does too. Birdie really.
Merriweather really turned it around. I mean, I remember when he was first coming into the game, for when
He,
those first couple months of the year, I was like, oh great, here we go.
I think he had a rough April, maybe 2 or 3 outings where we didn't like what he did, but he recovered fast.
Yeah. He's
He
also got
didn't.
electric stuff. I mean,
He does, and he didn't have a roller coaster season. I mean, I think he started poorly, but he absolutely cleaned it up. He can throw 100. He has a nasty curveball. I think he
mhm.
even has like a really good circle change, if I remember correctly. He has a full arsenal for a reliever. He's got 3 good swing and miss pitches. And that's what the Cubs are going to need. If they could duplicate, and I'm not saying go out and get a reclamation guy, but as we think about who they can go out and get, talked about improvements. Let's look at some free agents in the bullpen that they can go out and get swing and miss if Alzolay is not the closer. I mean, I'm sure he will be, but one option the Cubs could look to is Josh Hader, lefty, nasty stuff, can wipe out left-handed batters. He throws a really good slider. He throws in the high 90s, 96, 97, 98. He would be a good closer. I'm sure he'd command over 20 mil, 20 M's. A few other names here in terms of lefties. I've got Matt Moore at a 2.56 ERA. Will Smith he's pitching with the Rangers right now, although not as much. during the playoffs. Former Astros reliever who was really good this year. He had a 4.4 ERA, hence why he's not being trusted into those late innings. It's much more so Aroldis Chapman, and then the closer roles to Jose Leclerc. Will Smith, I liked. I'm surprised he went to the Rangers. The Cubs did not look at him. I think the Cubs will need to spend upwards of 10 to 15 mil on a closer or a late inning guy if they really want to establish a strong back end. Another guy would be Andrew Chafin. He didn't do as well this year. His ERA was in the high fours. Those are some lefties, some righties. Liam Hendriks on the 60-day, so he recovered from cancer, but then he got injured at the end of the season. Craig Kimbrell pitching for the Phillies now in the NLCS. He had a 3.26 ERA. Joe Kelly had a 4 even ERA. He did recover well with the Dodgers. And I think I missed a lefty. Brent Suter had a 3.38 ERA. I kind of would like him on the lower end. I think some Spotrac or Spot Track, however you say it. He would be projected on the lower end of the salary, so I think he'd be a solid lefty. Another name I saw who was on the 60-day, I don't think he pitched this year, or if he did, he was on the 60-day most of the year, was Blake Trinan from the Dodgers. He had nasty stuff. Good tunnel on the sinker and slider, throws in the high 90s. He's got electric stuff. If he were to become healthy, I'd like the Cubs to take a look at him. I'm sure they'll do another reclamation project type dude. But it is exciting to think about if they could get a couple of these guys. There's a few different areas that they could go into and acquire guys this offseason, but the bullpen to me is at the front of the list, and that's why we're talking about them right now. Next on my list would be, do the Cubs want to target a free agent starting pitcher? Do they want to go out? Do they make a trade with someone, or do they go out and get a free agent to slot into the number 2 role? Steele's probably our number 1. We've heard some early projections that Stroman will opt in. He would be a number 3, and Hendricks would be a number 4 if the club option is picked up. And then, of course, Tyone's a 5, and there's lots of depth behind him. So the depth isn't the issue. It's the swing and miss, and it's the ace caliber potential. John, do we want to go out and grab ourselves an expensive starting pitcher to pitch behind Steele?
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, I would say you need maybe 3 in the playoffs. I mean, 3 legit starters that you could throw. I mean, obviously, like you said, you can always use you can't ever have enough great pitching. We're fortunate enough, I think, that our bullpen, kind of going back to your previous point, I mean, you look at Josh Hader's ERA, I think it was like 1.28 over 60 plus games. Just looking at his stats real quick, because I obviously don't have your notes in front of me to research what we were going to talk about today. But Hader would be great. I think he's obviously a bona fide closer, with no offense to Adbert Alzolay, but he has his moments where he can kind of come off the hinges a little bit. He walks guys. Late in the season before he got injured, he was kind of starting to walk a little bit more. So I mean, he has the stuff. His arsenal is awesome, but like I said, I think you maybe need a legit closer. Adbert could probably close if Hader's not available. And then your bullpen is, I think he just needs to, Ross just needs to trust a little bit more and learn how to rest guys, I think, a little bit better. Because I think the way that he was pitching his, Lighter, I want to say Merriweather, they were pitching, I think, back to back. Like they weren't getting a typical schedule of how they should rest.
Right.
A starting pitcher, I mean, you have to look at who's available. I know Blake Snell is going to be up there. Aaron Nola, we've talked about this before. You have your lefty in Steele. You have a righty in Stroman as a 3, possibly, like you said. I mean, I think you need to go after someone like Nola or even Snell.
If you're the front office, what do you think the budget is for the AAV, average annual value, for one of these pitchers?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've heard
Chirpings.
chirpings. I've heard chirpings out there. I've heard birdies chirping, and what I hear is I can't remember who it was. If it was, I think it was Tony Andracki said that the front office, he believes that the Cubs are going to be aggressive in terms of going over the luxury tax in order to put together a team that is, pretty like ultra competitive.
Right.
Not that we aren't competitive right now, but that's starting pitchers. It's got to be one of them. Like you said, it depends on what we do with Hendricks. I mean, you know, and Stroman, I would assume is going to opt in.
And hey, they could trade him if they get
Right.
some other if they get freaking Cade Horton up there and he's
Yeah.
he's balling. You could always trade
Yeah.
Stroman at the deadline.
You forgot. I mean, there's Wicks too. I mean, Wicks is,
Oh yeah.
I mean, you got two lefties right there. So you got Wicks and you got Steele, Stroman, and Hendricks. But I think, like I said, I think it was Tony Andracki or somebody was saying, he's probably going to opt in. Stroman would opt in. And then I think with the 10-5 rule or something like that with Hendricks, you can't trade him. I have
Yeah,
to look more
it
into.
was one of the things with Hayward when Hayward was in on that massive Cubs deal. They could not package him and eat some salary because he had a no trade clause. So yeah, it's like 10 years of MLB service and 5 with the same team. And
Right.
so yeah, and I'm not sure if the Cubs are. I have heard again Bleacher Nation, huge fan of the huge friend of the pod. No, I don't know
Shout
them,
out.
but shout out Bleacher Nation.
Follow
They
us if you like Bleacher Nation. Follow us
they
on
mentioned
X.
yes, X. I'm gonna still say Twitter just for my own
Yeah.
sanity. They've
Yeah.
mentioned potentially, hey, what if Hendricks instead of 1 at 16 or 1 at 15 comes back at 2 for 20 something, and so you get the average value down. That would give you a little bit more room. I don't know how far they'll go into that 237. I think is the first threshold. There is a second threshold. It's another 20 mil above that at 257. I think the penalties get pretty severe above that second threshold, and so I bet if they do go above, you'd think they'll stay below the second one. So maybe they'll operate the 240s, and that should give them close to 50 mil to work with. So maybe there is some money to spend on Aaron Nola at 30. Hopefully not 30 mil, but maybe he's going to command 30 mil. We'll see how he does,
Okay.
and then LCS here,
Right. You
or
guys.
Snell. He might, or Yamamoto, Japanese free
Yeah.
agent pitcher. He's 25. He might go for 30
Right.
million. And so some of these guys, the other thing with I was gonna say Hoyer, but with Ricketts, the thing with the ownership is they don't want to give out massive deals. They gave out a 7-year deal to Jason Hayward. This ownership did. They also gave out a 7-year deal to Dansby Swanson. I think that's a better signing than Hayward. I don't know if they would give out a 7-year deal to, let's say, Nola or Snell, especially because they want to start developing their own pitching. But yeah, I agree. I think there may be some opportunity to sign someone like Eduardo Rodriguez. And if the Cubs can convince Yamamoto to sign, even if it's a 5, 6, 7-year deal, if you can lock in a young pitcher to pitch atop there with Steele, that'd be incredible. And you always have depth behind them or the young guys coming up. If someone's injured, you can either throw them into the rotation, they can go to the bullpen, or they can sit at Iowa for a short amount of time. But there's a lot of opportunities. And I truly
I,
do believe that in countries such as throwback
such
to
as
yeah
the Iraq.
yes pitchers that pitch in the country such as the Iraq. There's a lot of opportunity overseas in Japan with finding some young guys coming up. Speaking of Japanese players, I do not think the Cubs will sign Shohei Ohtani, but I do think they need a bat. And
Yeah.
so I want to ask you, what is more prudent for the Cubs this offseason? Should they take well, there's a few options. Do they take a stab at trading for Pete Alonso? Do they take a stab at trading for Juan Soto? Or do they couple one of those moves with re-signing Bellinger? Or do you think the front office, first of all, Bellinger made about 20 mil this year, and I think he's projected to make over 30 or around 30 next year. So that's only an additional 10 mil in salary they have to eat for his contract. The question is,
Right.
how much will each Alonso and Soto make when they re-sign them? That will eat into their budget, depending
I
on. Although they will get some salary relief from Hendricks and Stroman in 2025, so that would save them about the 40 mil that it would take to re-sign one of Soto or Alonso. Do you think the front office will make a trade for one of those big hitters?
I do. I just think there's too much trippings going on that you know with Pete Alonso. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. I feel like um it'll happen. I don't think it'll happen as quickly as maybe fans would want. It's probably going to happen around All-Star break. I don't think, I think the Mets are going to wait until his value is a little bit more, maybe he goes on a tear and they're able to kind of, work the Cubs against another few teams. The Cubs are in a great position to trade. And I know that, the Mets, I'm sure, would like PCA back, even though they're not going to get him.
No, there's no
But I
way.
mean,
Yeah.
there's no way in hell, yeah. But I think the Cubs will eventually wind up with Alonso. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be early though. I think they're going to let Bellinger walk because I don't think, I think they want to invest a little more in the starting rotation. I forgot about Tyone. We still got Tyone, and we're on the hook for him
He's
as
on the
well.
books for at least another couple of years here. If not,
A few
it's a
years,
3
yeah.
or 4 year deal.
I think it's a 4-year deal that we signed him last offseason. So
We'll see.
we'll see. I mean, maybe we can package him in a trade somewhere, but he turned it around somewhat, so I mean, as a fourth or fifth starter, he's not a bad option.
So just to
But going
retrace
back to your point,
Mhm.
I think Soto might be able to be had early if that's where the Padres want to pivot. If that's what they decide. I think in order for them to make a dent as far as like a deep playoff run, they probably need to go get Soto and Alonso.
Man, that would be a ton of prospects to give
It
up.
would be a ton of prospects. I know
And
I
that,
saw that as well on
oh
I
yeah.
don't know if it was Bleacher Nation or something, but someone had this checklist of like all the things that they expected the Cubs to do, and it was like acquire Soto and acquire Alonso, which that's a lot of depth in your farm system, which you would probably be now put in the bottom 15 at least in the league as far as your farm system. But you replenish that eventually, and it's when you're ready to win, like 2016 taught us, then you're ready to win. So I think we're right on the cusp. We'll see how 2024 goes, but I think we're right there that we should make a move. So
Yeah. I
your
just for
thoughts?
personal preference, yes. Over to me. No,
No,
I
what I
do
was also gonna say, no, actually,
just each time. Hey,
to see.
I do think that I think the Bellinger route for me is more likely just because I've heard this number brought up a few times, contact rate or strikeout rate. PCA was around a 30% strikeout rate at AAA. Small sample because I can't remember if that was his overall numbers or if that was AAA. He didn't spend actually a lot of time at AAA. They want to give him more time at AAA, hone a little bit of the instincts. He's a good defender.
Yeah.
I don't think they want him to slap at the ball like Ichiro. I don't think they want him to be Tony Campana, and I know they want him to slug, and he'll get some slug just from his speed, being able to turn a single into a double, double into a triple. PCA, I don't think will start the year at Wrigley or in Arlington as March 29th or the first game of the season. I do not think he'll break camp with the big leagues, the big league team.
He probably shouldn't know.
And if he doesn't, and they don't re-sign Bellinger, you're looking at Mike Tauchman center, which isn't a disaster, but that also would be telling the fans of this team that they don't want to compete right out of the gate. They saw what happened when they didn't start out strong. I mean, April was fine, May was a disaster, and so when they started off poor, they had to catch up, and they did well in the second half, but they didn't make the playoffs because they didn't have an overall good record. They didn't start off good. So I truly think, given these options, it's possible to me they trade for either one of Alonso or Soto. I don't really care. I just want one of them. Just like one of the shortstops this last offseason. I just wanted one of them. And I also want them to re-sign Bellinger because I think maybe not on a 7 or 8 year deal. And it may be risky. So that's a tough thing for sure. He has more variance. But I think he, for sure, I mean, you're not giving up any prospects to retain him. He's a Boris guy. So is Soto. I'm not sure if Alonso, I think he also is. All 3 of these guys are Boris clients. Means they're going to command more money. Yeah.
Alonso switched it this offseason, to Boris.
This poses a tremendous risk for the Cubs. Swanson was not a Boris client. Correa and one of the other ones was, I can't remember if it was Turner. But they got these big deals. They got many years. And so if the Cubs retain Bellinger, they'll have a starting center fielder. They'll have a backup option at first in case PCA does come up. And that allows some slotting to only find a position, someone to play third. Now, and of course, if you get retain Bellinger, you trade for Alonso, now you have center and you have first. You only have to cover third with, could be anybody. Morel, could be Candelario, could be Madrigal. There's lots of ways they could go. And so if they don't make any trades, they absolutely have to retain Bellinger. But if you just retain Bellinger and they can't make any of these trades, they're going to have to re-sign Jaime Candelario. And it looks like, John, you raised your hand. I didn't want to. That's that's the spiel I've got for the offense. Is they need to choose 2 of the 3. I would say is the number. Choose 2 of the 3. You don't make any trades. You re-sign Bellinger. Then you're gonna have to find another free agent. There's not that many in this class. I
was just gonna say the reason why I rose my hand was, don't forget about, when we make these signings, who you're blocking, right? So you're also blocking Mervis, who
I think that you can use him in a trade.
You could also use him in a trade for Alonso, and then you could move Cody to center.
You make this trade for Alonso, you're giving up Mervis, you're giving up probably Morel or Canario. You're making this trade because you have the ability to do it now, because there's 7 outfielders that look good and 2 signed. I mean, hell, maybe 3 signed. If you get Bellinger, you've got 3 outfielders down for the next 3 to 4 years extended. And then what do you do with all the excess outfielders? You can DH one of them. You can have one of them at first base. And maybe that's why they don't want to make a trade. There's 2 paths. It's either make the trade and deplete the farm system, like you said, be a top 5 and go down to a top 10 or top 15 farm. The only ask I have of these trades is that they don't trade significant pitching. I don't want them to trade Ben Brown, although they might. I know they won't trade Cade Horton, but I'm nervous. I'm nervous of what I'm not nervous what to give up of hitters. I'm nervous what to give up of pitching, because it has taken a long time for the Cubs to establish a pitching lab and establish good pitching in the minors, and I don't want to give that up as much as they probably will need to get a solid hitter in this offense.
I agree. Like you said, I mean, our pitching development has been so poor the last 10 years, maybe even longer. So you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. Like I said, you have to see when you make these free agent signings as far as pitching, how close is Cade Horton to being, to the major league level? We don't know. We don't know how he's going to perform at AAA next year and then quickly make the jump, or is he going to, we don't know. So there's a lot of unknowns. You do know what you have in major league talent. So that's why you trade prospects, because you already know how they're going to perform.
Right.
So sometimes it's better to just make the trade and assume that, maybe one of those prospects out of 3 are not going to make it. So
those are fair assessments. Fair assessments as we head into this offseason. I'm sure we'll meet again here soon to talk about any new developments for the Cubs. Maybe talk about the next World Series matchup coming up here this weekend or this next week. But I think we're ready to sign off here. This has been the Brotherly Cubs podcast, our very first episode. And thank you, John, for joining me. And we will see everyone next time.
Peace.